All right, welcome to another edition of Stories of a Colorful World Author Conversations. And we're here today with a visit to the Bahamas from A to Z creators, Veronica McFall and RJ Jenkins. It's so great to have you guys here today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Can we just start off by having both of you tell us just a little bit about yourselves?
RJ, you went first last time. I'll let you go. I went first last time. You go first.
Okay. My name is RJ Jenkins, and I am an educator. I'm a visual arts teacher. I teach at a boarding school in Maine. This is my 18th year at our school. I get to teach a whole bunch of really neat art courses like drawing and painting and digital media and AP advanced art and filmmaking. I also coach 3 sports. I coach cross-country running, I coach basketball, and I coach track and field. I do duty because we're a boarding school, and I have advisees, and so I really do kind of run the whole gamut of, I wear many hats, and it's a really cool experience. I get to know my students really, really well. My wife and 2 children live with me on campus. My 2 kids now go to my school, so it's great because I get to see them during the day, and it's just it's a really neat environment, and it's a place where I get to encourage other people to be creative. And I was really excited on this project to get to be creative myself. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Veronica McFall. I live and work from my home in New Jersey. I work at a university that's located upstate New York. I work in alumni relations. But prior to doing alumni relations work, I worked as a 4th grade teacher for a year in Florida. I've worked as a high school guidance counselor. I've worked mostly in educational not-for-profits. Admissions is where I got started in higher education. But I've always been a lifelong learner, very interested in helping young people achieve their goals, educational goals in particular. So I've had the opportunity to see the whole educational life cycle from preschool all the way through college. So I just have a passion for helping young people. I like to teach people different things because I'm curious. I like to learn about different people's cultures and things. I speak Spanish in addition to speaking English. I learned that when I was younger, and I've encouraged my kids to learn other languages as well. So I have 2 kids who speak Mandarin Chinese, and I have a son who has learned Spanish as well. But basically, I am, like I said, the mother of 3 kids who are now adults, 25, 21, and 20. And my husband and I live in New Jersey.
Thank you so much. Both of you are educators. Is that kind of something that connected the 2 of you on this project?
Mm-hmm. So Veronica and I actually worked together once upon a time back in the early 2010s.
Oh, wow.
At the school where I'm at now. She was here for a couple of years, and that's how we got to know each other and grew to be friends. And so that's how we were originally connected.
That's amazing. So Veronica, what inspired you to be a writer?
Well, when I was younger, my mom used to read to me a lot. It was so funny that when I was younger, I mean, I was an infant, I really wasn't, a reader at the point in time. And one of my aunts had passed by the house and she heard my mother talking to somebody. And so when she knocked on the door and my mother opened the door, she said, "Vanjie, who are you talking to?" Said, "Oh, I'm talking to Veronica." I was not, I wasn't cognizant of or able to speak at the time. So basically, my mother always believed in reading and speaking and having children hear proper language so that they can have, proper formation of words, etc., and grow their vocabulary. So the other thing that my mom did was she was really a very good writer. She kept a book on letter writing in the kitchen because she would sit to the kitchen table and write letters. And so when she would write, she would, use her letter writing book as a reference. So I learned how to write letters from my mom. So I learned how to be persuasive. I learned how to be complimentary. I learned those things just by, from my mother and her push for language. And when I was in 6th grade, I had a really cool 6th grade teacher, Mr. Curtis, who made us record ourselves saying a haiku. That was the first time that I heard myself speak. And I was like, wow, that's fascinating. I didn't even know I could do that. Basically, writing is something I kind of fell into, but language and language acquisition is something that I've always had a passion for.
Oh, I love it. And letter writing, a lost art that, that I wish so many more would get back into. An email is just not the same.
No. People like to get mail, I just
Exactly.
Past Sunday I sat to the dining room table and I had to write a whole bunch of birthday cards and thank you notes, and it was an exercise. My handwriting is not the best, but it's just something that is becoming a lost art, even for children to write with using script. That's a lost art. You don't teach it anymore.
Absolutely. I know. I keep saying I have my son write thank you cards, anytime he gets something, and he doesn't appreciate it now, but I'm hoping as he grows older, he will one day appreciate it.
Yes.
What about you, RJ? Were you always interested in art?
I have loved to draw since I was a very young child. It's something that's always fascinated me. I think my favorite character to draw, the first one that I remember was Garfield the cat. I used to draw him over and over and over again.
Yes.
My parents were X-ray technologists, and at that time, they used real film. No one uses real film anymore. And the film came in these cardboard packages, and there was white cardboard sheets that were used to pack the film, and my dad would bring those home. And so every week I'd get a whole stack of this really nice, pristine white cardboard, and I just drew on it all the time. And it was kind of like a gateway for me to be creative. And so as early as I can remember, I loved to draw and just create things, whether it was Garfield or whether as I got older, it was like athletes or just other cartoon characters or landscapes. And then as I got into high school, I realized that I liked it and I was pretty good at it. And I also had a really influential high school art teacher who pushed me and told me that this was something that I could continue to do as I became an adult. And so the passion just grew and it's never left. And so it's been a big part of my life. And I was always encouraged to be creative and continue to pursue my art dreams. And so I feel really fortunate that I had the support early on, because I know in speaking with some of my students, their parents are not necessarily really excited about them being artists.
Right.
The stigma that can come with being an artist,
Absolutely.
right? You're not going to find a job and there's nothing for you to do. And that's really not the case, certainly not anymore.
Right. Absolutely. Just being able to have someone, I'm sure they really appreciate you being there to encourage them, towards their dreams, which is why teaching and educators are so important.
I think as much as I love to be creative myself, and I feel really good when I complete something that I'm proud of, this is obviously one of those cases, but seeing a young person come back after having left our school and then come back and visit when they're in college or after college and show me what they've done and how they've expanded and grown. And if I had a small little part in that, I feel really, really good about that.
Absolutely. So what kind of inspired a visit to the Bahamas from A to Z?
Well, both of my parents are from the Bahamas. My father is from an island called Acklands, and my mother is from the island known as New Providence, and the capital city there is Nassau, and that's where she grew up. As a young person, we would travel back to the Bahamas every summer, primarily to visit my grandmother and my aunts and uncles and cousins, because my parents felt it was important, and it is important to maintain family ties. So basically that's part of it. But also just remembering all the fun things that I learned while I was visiting the Bahamas. I'd get the chance to go visit, for example, the island of Eleuthera, where my grandmother was from. And also once we went to Freeport, which is on the island of Bahama. So just visiting the Bahamas and having great memories of all of the visits there, the food, the culture, the history that we learned about, just having a sense of what the everyday life was like for kids. So fast forward, me having my own children, I think my youngest was 6 months old when we took them all to the Bahamas, and taking them around, letting them go to the beach, meeting relatives, etc. And I was like, this is something I need to start, writing down for them so that at least they can have an understanding of what the Bahamas is like. And so then fast forward to 2006, my father passed away, and I wanted to find a way to honor his memory. So I decided to write an alphabet book about the Bahamas.
Wow. How did your experience, growing up in the Bahamas and then taking your kids to the Bahamas, how did that impact or have an influence on your work and how you bring that culture into the world as well?
Well, I didn't grow up in the Bahamas. I wasn't born there. I was born in the United States. My parents immigrated to New Jersey. My father came to the United States in 1943, and my mother came in 1966. So I grew up in New Jersey, and basically, it's kind of interesting when you grow up in a culture that's not yours sometimes, because the town that I grew up in is predominantly white, but I live in a household of people of color. And also being, the child of immigrants adds another dimension to who you are. So it really is in terms of trying to find your identity when your background and your current situation where you live don't really match. I mean, the Bahamas is a tropical country, predominantly African peoples, people of African descent, Black people. Everything from the government, hospitals, doctors, nurses, lawyers, all mostly professionals are Black. And you live in the United States, where the opposite is the case, where it's predominantly white, and people of color are in the minority, not in the majority. So trying to navigate both worlds growing up, didn't see many opportunities or examples of people in literature who had the experience that I have. Especially not in children's books. You read about, fun with, these readers that show you, Dick and Jane. And I think that later on, like in the mid 70s, they put a Black character in a Dick and Jane book, and I was like, yay, look! And Ezra Jack Keats, of course, wrote The Snowy Day, which was, a work that just sent ripples through the communities of color, because it was like the first time the child of color was featured as a storybook character. So, not seeing many examples of people who looked like me kind of made me want to go ahead and do this now. And I started this project in 2006.
That's wonderful. So what was the process like for both of you in terms of creating this project?
Want to go ahead, RJ?
Well, so much collaboration. So Veronica, this is her idea. This springs from her experience and her passion for the Bahamas and for her family and the culture and everything that goes along with it. And I have only been to the Bahamas very, very briefly. So I was there with my wife on our honeymoon. We were on a cruise, and that was one of the stops, but it was only there for less than a day. So it was beautiful while we were there, but so everything that I am getting out of this is coming from, obviously from images, right? But from her, right. And from her stories and her recollections and her perceptions of what things need to look like and feel like. So, and it's her story. So I leaned a lot on, how should this look? How should that look? The number one thing that she told me over and over again was brighter and more colorful, brighter. And so I really took that to heart. But we collaborated a ton, and it was all through either phone or text or Zoom. We hadn't seen each other since Veronica left Maine until this summer when we finally reconnected. So everything was done over, over long distance, and that was challenging, but also, we made it work because we obviously wanted to do this and do it well. So tons of collaboration.
Did that help you decide in terms of there's so much information that you can get from this, which is great, but really as an artist, kind of like deciding, okay, what gets highlighted in the illustrations? What content are you going to make sure is predominant across each page?
For sure. So the written word was there, and it's my job to interpret it. And so I would sketch out some ideas and kind of start almost like a rough draft, if you will, and then share it with Veronica, and she would give me some of her impressions. Maybe think about this, or don't forget about that, or let's brighten this up, or maybe we need to add this.
Okay.
And in some cases, we just realized that we were trying to jam pack too much information on a 2-page spread, and we ended up taking some of our letters and turning them into 2-page spreads. And also just adding more stuff, because there were some things that she felt like just we couldn't leave out. And so the book kind of grew and grew as we went. But I think for the better. It made more work, but it was definitely for the better. So that's what I would say about that.
What about you, Veronica? What made you choose kind of like the A to Z format versus maybe telling a story about a trip to the Bahamas or something in that manner?
I wanted kids to have fun. These last 6 months have not been fun. They've been very tough. But I wanted kids to have fun. And it also, the A to Z format allows kids to really enhance their vocabulary. Partially because I grew up watching Sesame Street. I'm 53 years old. I grew up watching Sesame Street, and I thank Sesame Street for a lot of who I am. So they do a lot of work on phonics. They do a lot of work on letters, and I like that. I think it's fun. I think it gives you a little bit of freedom. And I wanted to have something that was similar to what Sesame Street offered. And that was a childhood memory too. So I just wanted to do that. And I felt that because the Bahamas is such a rich country in terms of history, culture, and natural resources and human resources, I felt like, well, it wouldn't be hard to do an A to Z. Some letters were tricky. I was the hardest one. That one was real hard. But we made it work. We found a couple of things, and we put them in the book.
I learned so much about the Bahamas, and am almost, because I haven't been able to travel, these last couple of months, I am really ready to go out and travel, to see some of these places and to learn more about some of these things. Like, I did not know how many islands there were on the Bahamas, that represent the Bahamas. And just thinking about so much history and culture that you can gain. So although it may be a children's book, so many people can learn so much from this book. So were there some things that in the edit you wanted to fit in, but just couldn't fit in at this time?
Yeah. I like to eat, if you can't see. I enjoy food, and food is a lot of what we do when I go and visit my relatives. So there are lots of foods that I wanted to include but couldn't. I did include one dish that all kids like, and you're gonna have to read the book to find out what dish it is. But their food, some of the items that I like to eat are not in there. Desserts, fruits that are tropical foods that you would find in the Bahamas and other islands. Let's see, more historical figures that I would have liked to include. More islands that I would have liked to include. So there are a lot of things that I had to unfortunately leave out of this book. And I really wanted to make it a coherent story. So when you're trying to make a coherent story out of an alphabet, you really have to be very careful about what you include and think very carefully about what you're going to exclude.
Mhm. I would just add that the thing that I think I'm really proud about with this book is that, you know, it is, you know, colorful and fun and hopefully entertaining, but it does have so much information.
Right.
And so I think it works for a wide range of kids. I think obviously younger kids can look at it and get something out of it, but older kids too. There's so much information, so much that I didn't know, and I too, like I really need. We talked about this, Veronica. I need to get down there and see it for myself. One of the things that I think was challenging as an artist, but also rewarding, is that because it's fact-based, it has to look pretty close to what the real thing looks like,
Right.
so that, you know, if you have a kid who has the book and then they go there, they got to be able to look in the book and say, hey, okay, I see that. That's from that page. I remember
Right.
that. So
Absolutely. Were there, I know based on the hurricanes that hit, were there any places that maybe in the book, but may have been destroyed or are being rebuilt or anything in terms of the devastation that happened last year?
The Abacos was adversely affected by the Hurricane Dorian. They're still trying to repair the damage. The devastation was unbelievable. I mean, Category 5 hurricane, that was like one of the first, hopefully the last Category 5s that hit the Bahamas. And in the Abacos, there's a historic landmark called the Elbow Reef Lighthouse that we talk about in our book. And we wanted to make sure that that was featured because it's a historical landmark. And also it's one of the few remaining kerosene lit lighthouses in the world. So that was important to put that there in the book. So we did feature that lighthouse, and we do feature the Abacos in the book.
Okay. And so what's something that you hope kids get out of this book?
I'll go. I want kids to be excited to learn about the Bahamas, but also just to explore and seek out information. I mean, the characters in this book, that's something that they're driven to do, is to find out more. They find this place that they want to know more about. They have a connection to it, but they just want to learn, and they have this thirst for knowledge. And I'm hoping that that will rub off on our readers, and that they, whatever it is that they're interested in, that they will realize that they can go out and there's obviously now more than ever many ways that you can find information about things, so that they would be inspired to talk to people, to do research, and to get the facts on things and learn more. I also hope that it inspires just a sense of adventure. And we've talked about, you know, how we're hoping that it would inspire people to want to travel to places maybe that they haven't been to before, but definitely this sense of adventure and wonder over cultures and things that you may not have a lot of experience with.
I think for me, I based the characters off of my children, primarily because I wanted to give other children of color some role models to look at or look up to. You know, my kids are curious people. They've always been that way, which, you know, I'm glad that they are. But I also wanted to encourage young Black men to be adventurous, to take risks, to travel, to do things that, you know, might not be expected or are outside of the narrative that we hear and see sometimes for young Black men. That it's okay. You can do whatever you want, and you can be whatever you want. You could try wherever you want. You can live wherever you want. Mm-hmm. And also for folks to understand that family ties are important. there are lots of people who live all over the world who have family in one place and family in another place, but how do they maintain those family ties? It's because of travel, communications, staying in touch with one another and being intentional in that respect. So, basically, I hope that, young people get a lot out of the book. I hope that, all kids, no matter who or what they are, where they live, will get something out of the book and the story and be adventurous. I think that there's a lot of beautiful places in the world for them to see. And we just wanted to highlight this book, highlight the Bahamas first, hopefully highlight other countries around the world too.
Which I definitely, see, and even for me getting out of the book and wanting to go and visit some of these places and not necessarily, learning more about different islands that I can go to versus, ones that may be popular or more tourist attractions, but really being able to go and see other islands and see the culture, because that is one of the things that I have really thought about in terms of travel, not just kind of like taking from a culture, but also what can you give back? What can you, go and immerse yourself in the culture versus just taking.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's partially why, it's good that Vanessa in the book is a tour guide, of sorts, to help her cousins learn more about the country because she lives there. But also it's a way for them to get in touch with what her everyday routines are, and what, her environment is like. Because it's important to understand your family. And that's why you make trips. That's why people have family reunions, and that's why people communicate. And I think Zoom and other platforms like it help to make it easier for families to stay in touch. Whereas before, you might not have stayed in touch as much, but now this platform just, erases borders and distance and time. So
Absolutely. So with this book, you self-published. What inspired you to create Knowledge is Capital?
I had to think about that question a lot. Well, like I said, I'm an educator. I've done, preschool all the way through college, and it's a process. And I've been very, very fortunate to be able to have gone to the schools that I've attended and worked at. But one thing that my father always said to me was, once you have something in your head, nobody can take it away from you. And my father, unfortunately, was only able to go as far as the 8th grade because he was the 13th child of 13 children. And his father could not afford for him to go beyond 8th grade locally, because at that time, and it's still the case, if you want to go to high school, you have to go to New Providence. And he just couldn't afford to do that. My father was a custodian at an elementary school in a town nearby, much beloved by the young people that he worked around and with over the 35 years that he was there. And one of his really good friends who passed away recently said to me, I think your father always wanted to be a teacher. And I said, you know what? That makes a lot of sense. He loved kids. He loved to travel. He had a great personality, very outgoing. Everybody loved him. Great dancer. He could pretty much walk up to anybody and talk to anybody. But, he made sure that me, my brother, and my sister all had an education, and my mother as well. That's what they insisted on, that all of us go to college. And that was like an unspoken, unwritten expectation that you were going to go to college, and that was it. And so we did. And that was the gift my father and my mother ever gave to us. So education and knowledge is very important. I worked in colleges where I've had the opportunity to help young people gain access to colleges, help them negotiate the financial aid system, help young people with their college admission essays. I've even helped young people prepare for standardized tests. I've taught etiquette, just to try to give young people an opportunity to have a little bit of a leg up, to be able to start the next chapter of their lives. Sometimes they're the first person in their family to go to college. Sometimes they're the first person to graduate from high school. So, Knowledge is Capital kind of wraps all of that together for me, because I created the publishing arm because I wanted to publish my book, and I wanted to have the freedom to publish my book, and work with wonderful artists like RJ, to be able to tell stories, not just for children, but for other folks as well, but also to provide educational programs. So like helping young people with their college admission essays, or helping young people with etiquette, or taking young people on tours, or taking families on tours. So I have that flexibility by creating this company that helps to provide educational and publishing services.
Do you see yourself publishing or helping others publish as well?
I think once I work the kinks out of this one, we can start accepting significant.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Got to work out the kinks with this first. So I think we're doing okay though.
Yeah, it's amazing how much there is that you have to learn how to negotiate in order to publish a children's book. It's incredible.
Yes.
It is definitely, you know, a lot to put the pieces together and make sure that everything's just right to get it out there, and then continue to push it. So what does diverse representation in children's books mean to you?
You want to take that one, RJ? No, I'll follow.
So Kanika and I talked a little bit beforehand about, I've done a little bit of research just on my own. The more I dove into this project, and the lack of diversity that's found in children's books, and particularly for like lead characters, was stunning to me. And you know, as a white person, like, it's something that before this I really never thought a lot about, to be perfectly honest with you, and it's really opened my eyes. And so I'm really grateful that I've been able to go on this journey, and that Veronica has opened, helped open my eyes to this. So this disparity is just so huge, and we're in our own way demonstrating that young people of color are lead characters too. They are, and that they're inquisitive, and they're intelligent, and that they're travelers and adventurers, and they can do all of these amazing things, and they need to be represented. And so I think, as someone who's coming at it from as an outsider, but being brought into this world, I feel really passionate about that aspect of it. And when she first asked me to take this on 3 or 4 years ago, I was just like, how am I going to even do this? And I was just thinking about it simply as an artist.
Right.
And now I think I have a much better and bigger understanding of the implications behind it, rather than it's just a book. Like, it means so much more to me, and I'm really grateful for that.
Thanks for that, RJ. Yeah, it really is so much more than a book. Like I said, Snowy Day was the only book that, we had in the early 70s. I'm like, did you see that? Yeah, people would see other people of color on TV. You'd call each other on the phone, like, hey, did you see Flip Wilson tonight? Those kinds of things, because there was so little representation of us. I'm talking about Black people in particular, because that's my experience, that, it was like you're almost invisible. And we're not invisible. We make up about 5% of the US population, and we've made some significant contributions to this country. So we should be more visible and more representative, in greater numbers, not only in children's literature, but other areas as well. I mean, we've made some serious contributions to this country, as have Asians, Latinx, Native Americans, and other groups of people. But people of color, our stories need to be told. They really need to be told, because there's a lesson to be learned. I learn every single time I pick up a book, or I see a factoid on Instagram about somebody that I'd never heard of before in history, who's a person of color. And I think it's important, because stories are important. They help us to be strong. They help us to give us direction. They help us to have self-confidence. And that's really what I wanted to do with this book, was give children of color self-confidence to travel. I was very lucky when I was in high school. I was able to go and live abroad in Spain when I was about 16 with a Spanish family. and having to use my Spanish on a daily basis. And I was the only Black kid on that study group that left from my town. So, you can't be afraid to be the only one. And my mother always made sure that we were never afraid to be the only one. Doesn't matter. She's like, you go and you do it. So, that kind of like, we just pushed that to the side and said, okay, I'm the only one. Okay, now what?
Right.
Move on.
Which definitely makes an impact as you grow and, take risks and, journey into the future, because that is what life is about taking risk and making sure that you push and hold on to your dreams regardless of the circumstance.
Absolutely.
So is there any advice that you would give to an aspiring writer?
Just do it. If you have, like me, I've got I almost brought them all out here. I've got these little notebooks. I like to use teeny weeny little notebooks. I won't say the brand name, but I enjoy writing in them. And I've got about maybe 6 or 7 in my drawer in my bedroom that I keep, and I've kept them since my kids were little, because I just like to write down notes. I get teased for writing notes, actually. But, I refer to my notes because, you make observations about who you talk to, what you said, and there might have been something that somebody said that stuck with you that, made you feel better. So I just think that it's important just to write, or if your thing is not writing and you rather speak, record yourself. That's what my 6th grade teacher did. He empowered us to speak, to have a voice, to hear our voice. To recite a poem and to hear yourself recite the poem and play it over and over and over again to get used to hearing your voice. Everybody has a voice. Everybody has a story. And it's just important to do it. I mean, I think everybody can write something. If it's a poem or a haiku or a speech, write.
Absolutely. What about you, RJ? Is there any advice that you would give to aspiring artists?
I would say that if they love to draw something, then keep drawing the things that they enjoy and get really good at those things, but then branch out and challenge yourself to draw something new. And I think that can be where people get stuck, is they fall into the rut of drawing the same things over and over again. And you've got to try to push yourself beyond your comfort zone and try some new things. If you have an opportunity to take classes to learn more, or even just going online, there are so many resources online that you can find how to do things. Take those opportunities to push your boundaries. Try different materials. One of the big lessons that I've learned from this project, this was a digital art piece project. So originally I was thinking I was going to do this painting, and it just didn't seem that it was going to work out. And so I had some experience in Photoshop, but I had never really drawn or painted in Photoshop. And so I took the plunge, and that was a huge difference maker. And so stepping out on that ledge and trying something new, go for it, because if you have the passion and you're willing to work at it, you're gonna get better and you're gonna figure it out. So I think the biggest thing is to enjoy it. I think so many times in our lives we get busy and a million other things take priority, and they're not necessarily that's not necessarily a bad thing. But if it's a passion of yours, you've got to try to carve out some time in your life to make it a priority, and in the long run it'll pay off.
Absolutely. So are either of you reading any good books now?
I'm going to be honest. So my job it's 50 or 60 hours a week because I'm in a boarding school. The reading time is really minimal. I will say that the book that I push on my students is called Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. And it's an amazing, it's been around. Actually, my high school teacher used it with me. back in the 90s, and it's still as relevant as ever. And it's for people who think that they can't draw or are beginners. And I love it, and I still refer to it. There's so many tidbits of really useful information, and it's as much about understanding your brain as it is about understanding how to draw, tapping into the right side of your brain, which is the creative side. It's fascinating, and so I read that in class. We read it in class, and I love it. That would probably be mine.
Oh, I'm gonna have to pick that one up because my son started high school this year, and he has an art class, and he hasn't drawn in years because he always says he's not good at it. But he is actually good artist, and now that he has to take it and he's learning more about different techniques, you know, he's starting to get into it a little more.
Awesome.
And what about you, Veronica? Anything?
Yeah, I went to the library recently and picked up a couple of books that have been on the New York Times bestseller list. Like I picked up Anti-Racist Baby. I wanted to read that for myself. And then over the summer, a friend had sent me a book called The New Kid, about a kid who is in Washington, grows up in Washington Heights, and then he goes off to a day school in Riverdale, probably Riverdale, New York. And so I'm reading that, and that's a graphic novel too. So I also read a lot of children's books in order to write this one, which was not a problem for me.
Absolutely.
So, and I still read children's books, but my favorite children's book author growing up was Richard Scarry. It was just huge. These books, they're oversized. They're like this big and huge, and the pictures just keep you engaged, and the text is all over the place. And I was like, yeah, that's my kind of book.
Are there any children's books that, if for a parent, that you might say are must-haves for a children's library?
I love The Giving Tree, Shel Silverstein. We read that one to our kids so much that my daughter, when she was 3, knew it by heart. She literally could read. She couldn't read yet, really, but she could recite the whole thing all the way through.
Absolutely.
I would say any book that features Black children, Black historical figures, get them. When my daughter was growing up, my neighbor across the street would make it a point that whenever an author of color came to town, to the local children's bookstore, she would stand online and get an autographed copy to give to my daughter.
Wow.
So we have quite a nice collection of books by African American and Black authors that my daughter has. American Girl series. My daughter read a lot of those. Great stories too. Dr. Seuss, of course. Richard Scarry. Let's see, who else? There was one more. Oh, this book we really liked. It's called The Empty Pot. It's a really good story. A very good lesson in it too. So,
absolutely. So, how can people stay connected with you two?
Well, they can visit our website, which is knowledgeiscapital.com. There you can see some updates. We just updated, I think 2 weeks ago, RJ, it was the fact page.
Yes.
We created a page to tell kids how they can collect facts and what are facts. So we added that to the website. So we're just going to keep coming up with stuff to help kids, parents, teach children about facts and knowledge. So that's how they can keep in touch with us on that. We're also on Facebook. Sometimes we'll drop a video or photos. So we try to keep things moving at least a couple times a month to keep our audience engaged.
Awesome. And we'll make sure that we drop your website and your Facebook pages in the comments so people can get in touch with you and also be able to purchase this wonderful book.
That's great. Thank you.
I liked it.
So I would like to thank both of you for joining us today. Is there anything else that you would like to share?
Be bold and be courageous.
Yes.
Be creative and have fun.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And we're going to sign off until next week.
Thank you very much for joining us. And thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you.